Hello, my love, and welcome back to another episode of the Queen of Pep Talks podcast. Happy Friday. I hope that your day is just so fucking fantastic. And if it is not, as usual, I am just sending you so much love. I am very excited to share today's conversation with you. I am interviewing Alexis McCloskey. She is a business clarity coach, well known as the Tough Love Coach on Instagram. She and I have so much in common in terms of our mindsets and the way that we think and our kind of like gentle yet tough love approach with the women who come into our world. We had a really beautiful conversation around all things mindset. We talked a little bit about business. We talked some about pivoting. We talked about Instagram. But I want to say, if you are a woman who is struggling with fear of failure, fear of leaning in and going after what it is that you want, maybe you know all of the things to do, but for some reason you're just still standing in your own way and you're not taking action steps towards what it is you want in your life, this episode is a must listen for you. Alexis talks a lot about over-consuming information without actually taking action. She talks a lot about embracing failure. We talk about all or nothing mindset. There are so many powerful takeaways that I know you will find inside of today's episode. I'm going to recommend that you connect with Alexis on Instagram. Her handle is the Tough Love Coach. I will also put that in the show notes of this episode. And I just found out this week, very exciting news, which is why she doesn't reference it on the episode. She is launching a podcast that will be available on Monday. It is called XOXO, Your Tough Love Coach. And I believe from what I know about the podcast, it is going to be a little bit similar to the Queen of Pep Talks podcast, really short, potent pep talks that are going to be really powerful for you in improving your mindset and improving your life. So I'm going to recommend that you connect with her, go follow her podcast when it comes out on Monday. I hope that you guys enjoy this conversation just so much. I know I did. If you have not already left a rating and review on the Queen of Pep Talks podcast, I'm going to again ask you to do so. You guys have been writing just some of the most heartfelt and beautiful reviews, and I'm so grateful for you. We have incredible things in store for the podcast in 2023. We have been interviewing some of just the best, incredible people, and I'm so excited to continue to share these conversations with you. I love you to absolute pieces. I hope that you have the best weekend, and I will talk to you on Monday's episode where we are doing the final episode of the What I Wish I Knew Sooner series. And let me tell you, I'm still working on getting Chris to join me in the podcast. He said he would do it. Getting him to sit down and actually record with me this weekend, that might be a little bit more difficult, but keep your fingers crossed that you will hear Chris on Monday's episode where we will be talking about things we wish we would have known sooner in relationships. We are 6 years almost married and have a very healthy and happy relationship. So I'm hoping that he will share his 2 cents with you because let me tell you, he is one of the smartest people I know. I love you guys. Enjoy this conversation. If you love today's episode, it would mean so much if you sent me a message on Instagram or shared this episode with your audience. I love you guys and I will talk to you soon. See ya. I am here with Alexis McCloskey, who is an online coach, and her and I have so much in common in terms of a little bit of a tough love approach. She might be a little bit tougher than I am, a little bit more blunt and straight to the point than I am. I kind of wrap my tough love in a hug, and she's kind of like maybe a punch to the face. No, I'm just kidding. I'm so happy to have you here and have this discussion for my audience. There's so much that I think you have been through in terms of the things that you go through in your own personal life that will be so valuable for my audience, but we also have so much in common that I know the conversation is just going to be so good and so valuable. So why don't you, Alexis, introduce yourself to my audience, let them know who you are and what you do, and then we'll move into the conversation.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. I feel like this has been a very long time coming, just like internet friends for a while. So yeah, I'm Alexis McCloskey. I am a business clarity coach. It's pretty interesting because my story in terms of what I do has changed so much. I started as a holistic health coach, then I was in fitness, then I did network marketing, then I kind of was life coaching, and then I've got so good at that, I was like, let me add the business in there. And so my approach to helping people with business isn't just the strategies and social media and how to make more money. We talk about that, but mine is much more of helping you figure out what your blind spots are, and the blind spots that are really hidden, not just like, oh, you might have a little bit of perfectionism or things like that. It's kind of I use the phrase "whose voice is that" a lot, because I find that within life, business, there's so many things that we're going after and we're doing that we don't realize that something is in the way. And I say this a lot, like we're working on problem A when we really should be working on problem B. And I like to kind of solve that problem for people. Not that as coaches, we don't give everyone the answers. We help them find the answers within themselves, but that's really what I like to do. So then they can just have more freedom. They can work less. I work with a lot of workaholics, perfectionists. So it's really just gaining clarity on identifying what those roadblocks and those blind spots are, and finding a way that you can show up for your business, your side hustle, your dreams, your goals, whatever that fits for you. If you have things like ADHD, you're the mental illness, like your privilege, where you live, like all these things that matter, because it's not a one size fits all. So I like to kind of really bring clarity to all those spots in people's lives.
I love that. I think it's so important that, especially when it comes to things like ADHD and mental wellness and being, that can impact, as you and I both know, your mental health can deeply impact your business and your success in your business. Because if you don't feel good as a human, you're going to struggle a lot to show up powerfully within your business, no matter what it is that you're doing. Can we talk a little bit? And I didn't think that this would come up, but I think this will be powerful for people in my audience, especially a lot of the coaches that I work with are new to building businesses. And in the beginning, there can sometimes feel like a lack of clarity in what it is that they actually want to do and who they want to help. And I think that a lot of people fail to realize that as you evolve as a person, so will what you want to do. What is that journey of kind of pivoting multiple times throughout the course of your business? What does that look like and felt like for you? Have you ever struggled with feeling like I'm abandoning like this dream that I had for myself initially? Or has it always felt like something that felt natural or good for you? What does it feel like to pivot from kind of one type of coach to another, to another, to another? How has that worked for you over the last several years in your coaching business?
Yeah, so I feel like it's interesting for me because there's two sides that are totally different and almost kind of like contradicting with this. I would say for like 70 to 80% of that journey, like we all have things we struggle with, right? Like, and that's what makes us really great at helping people, because we went through the shit. Am I allowed to curse on here?
Yeah, of course, I curse all the time.
We went through the shit, and like then we figured it out, and then we can, guide other people in that way. So there's a lot of things I struggle with, but one thing I think that I didn't struggle with, that I feel like I kind of have a power to come from a different angle from, is like not having the fear of failure. My mom, like growing up, very much was just like I think a quote I used to repeat to myself when I played volleyball was like, expect to win, don't be afraid to lose. And so I very much like leaned into like, if I try something and it doesn't work out, it's literally not the end of the world. And so that for me within that journey was like my North Star, because I didn't let the fact that like, I'm going to start this and it might not work out, like, scare me, or I'm starting this, I'm realizing this isn't what I want to do. I want to pivot. That's okay. So naturally, I feel like there was a lot of that within there. But with that said, the other piece that I had to work through a lot was like people pleasing. So, and I didn't even really consider myself a people pleaser until I worked with a coach, well, not even therapist, a coach. And she like opened my eyes to me realizing, it's kind of like when I work with people, a lot of people tell me they're not perfectionists. And then I ask them a few questions and they're like, oh my God, didn't realize that was me. So I realized that people pleasing was a big thing. And especially within network marketing, like I grew it really successful. I did it for 8 years and I made 6 figures. And for me to like step away from running a team when I really had a really great relationships with a lot of girls there, and it was a part of my life, like, you understand that like you're in this community. And for me, not only to like, it wasn't really, I was afraid to walk away from the job or the experience or whatever. I literally only cared about like what they would think of me, or if they felt I was abandoning them, or even like in my business, when I shifted from more life coaching to business, I created a new Instagram earlier this year. And I was afraid that all the people that followed me, one that followed me when I was literally like my Instagram back in the day was mint chocolate vegan. I'm not even vegan anymore. I was like vegan recipe page, whatever that was. And then I was mint chocolate paleo because I decided to change that. It was a mess. So, but like all those pivots, there was a piece of me that was like, it's okay, like it didn't work out. You want to change, like listen to that over everything else. But then the thought of what are people going to think, or are they going to worry, or are they going to think that you're like you can't make up your mind? And so it was constantly this feeling of, are these people, even when I change my Instagram, are they still going to want to engage with me? And even though I worried about that and I worked through a lot of like people pleasing, the thing I realized was that at the end of the day, I think about this with everything. When I'm on my deathbed, am I going to care more that I made people like me and I didn't abandon them? Or would I regret more not going after my dreams just to like appease someone? I knew I would always feel better. Didn't make the decision any easier necessarily, but it made me stronger to be able to be like, that's what matters more. And I think we live in a world where that feels really selfish to do that, but it's not. It's just not.
I love that. I understand so much because I was also in network marketing and I had people who I had beautiful relationships with. And even my upline, who was like a famous upline with Beachbody, there was so much fear and like not running that business anymore of like, is he going to hate me? What are the people in the community who I've created relationships with? How are they going to feel about me? But at the end of the day, I often also think about how am I going to feel when I'm on my deathbed? And I'm also always like, this is kind of morbid that you think that way, but it puts things into such a powerful perspective of like, who are you living your life for? Are you living for you, or are you living for the sake of other people? And when we value, which is I think what a lot of people do, they value the opinions of other people more than they trust and value the opinion that they have of themselves and for themselves. So they're constantly walking in alignment with what other people want for them, and they lose sight of their own goals and dreams and wants for their lives. I would love to talk a little bit more about how you feel about fear in your life. I have always been a person who convinced myself that I was really afraid of failure until recent years, since I've done so much work on myself and started a business. Like, you pretty much can't be afraid of failure if you're going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I've really been able to reframe my feelings and my relationship with fear. I think a lot of people take on like failure and seeing that as something that they become if it happens to them. Like, oh, I failed at that, so I'm now a failure. When you recognize, and I can recognize like, oh, I can fail at something doesn't mean that I'm a failure and doesn't mean that I can't pick myself up and try again. I know that so many people in my audience, so many listeners are women who are afraid of taking a step towards their goals and dreams because they're like, well, what if I fail? What happens then? How can they work to reframe their relationship or change their relationship with failure and that fear of failure so they can be more like you and more like I've become, where it's like, yeah, fuck it. If I fail, it's okay. I've number one, learned something along the way, because you learn so much in the things that often feel like they're defeating you. But so they're willing to embrace that so that they can have an opportunity. When we don't move because we're afraid to fail, we hold ourselves back from the opportunity of creating the success that you want. What would you say to them if there's someone listening who's like, I'm just so afraid of failing? How can you help them reframe that?
Yeah. So I think, and this is a lot of the work that I do. I want to say one thing before I kind of go into that is the thing that I remember. There's so many quotes around success and failure and things like that. But I think one of the things that sticks out to me most is success leaves clues. The most successful people that that you look up to on social media, entrepreneurs, big time companies, have failed so much. It's the people who like are the most successful that fail more. Like the master has failed more times than the student has ever even tried. It's the people who are trying to avoid failure so much that are the ones that aren't getting where they want, and it's like, ding dong, like the thing you're trying to avoid is literally what you need to lean into in order to be successful. So whenever I get nervous about taking on a new challenge or getting outside my comfort zone, I'm like, if this doesn't work out, like I had a lot of failures this year. Like last year, crushed it. This year, to be honest, it was a good year and I still made great money. I learned a lot of things, but I made a lot of shifts in my business. And there were like months that I was like, oh my God, why does my income look like this? But I have learned so much that I'm so excited for next year. Like I'm still going to, crush December, but like, I'm very excited for next year because I was even talking to my husband about this. I was like, I have so many more tools and understandings now that I didn't from if I think about 2021, yeah, I made like a shit ton of money, but nothing that I learned a bit, but like I learned way more this year, even still making great money, but like having a lot of different failures and things that worked out. So like want to say that. But for me, what I would say to someone, again, this is a lot of the work that I do. I'm all about working on the root of the problem versus the surface level. So if someone comes to me and they say like, yeah, cool, Jess and Alexis are talking about not being afraid of failure. Awesome. Would love to do that. Can't. I would say instead of just trying to not be afraid of failure or to like go from that inspirational, you can do it type of sense, ask why is it so hard for you to like, or why are you so afraid of failure in the first place? Because and this is when we go back to our past, is it there's so many different things and like doing this coaching, because even though I did network marketing all throughout that time, I was always coaching people. So I've been coaching people for almost 10 years in like a bunch of different capacities, and the different like reasons for that answer, it varies so much. Like it could be like, mom and dad were hard on you and you became a perfectionist in childhood, or maybe your parents got a divorce and you tried to become a perfectionist in order to save their marriage, because that's what we do as kids, right? Or you saw your parents have a business and it failed. Like I could go, the list goes on and on. But if you figure out what parts of you, your past self, your inner child that experienced failure as a bad thing, or it literally could just be society. We growing up in school were taught that if you have grades, get your report card, you get an F, that's a bad thing. We hide it. We make sure our parents don't see it. We try to like change it so nobody looks. And I think Brooke Castillo on the Life Coach School podcast talked about this before. She said, like, what if we were taught to raise our failure tolerance? What if instead of hiding the Fs, it was like, oh, okay, I got an F. Let me figure out what I need to change. We wouldn't be so afraid of failure. So if you can identify for you, whether it's mom, dad, caretakers, teacher in fourth grade, or society, or all of those mixed into one, you can work on nurturing and healing those parts of you at the root level. So then the process of not being afraid of failure doesn't feel like pulling teeth. It feels second nature. And this is what I see all the time. And this is what I talk about these blind spots. We're working on problem A, which is, I just got to get tougher, got to be like Gary Vee and Grant Cardone and just 10x everything. Instead of saying problem B is, what parts of me look at failure as the scariest thing? Because it's little me that is somehow telling big me now, failure is scary. We have to stay away from it. So if you can shift that perspective, that process will be a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. One of the things that you said there that I think a lot of people are actually terrified of, what a lot of the women that I work with, and you probably too, have a history of failure. It's not that they've never tried to achieve things. Like a lot of the women, I think, especially in the weight loss and emotional eating and binge eating space, it's not that they've never tried to create change in that area of their life. It's that they've tried so many times and they have failed so many times that it's like, I don't even really want to do it again because I don't want to experience the failure. But you said something, I can't remember your exact words, around being willing to like look back at your past failures and learn from that and take maybe a different approach, or learn like, what can I do different this time so I can maybe avoid failure? I know for myself, there was a lot of fear around that. I didn't want to, much like you were saying, like you get an F in school and you hide it. I was like trying to hide from my own failures for a really long time. It's like, oh, I experienced this, but I don't want to look at it. I don't want to acknowledge what I could have done differently, because then I have to take ownership for it. And if I'm going to try again, I have to change what I'm doing. So I just kept trying the same things over and over and over again. Do you find that with your clients too? Is like, they're trying to achieve the same goal and they try the same approach a million times and they're just not moving forward, and they're afraid to even acknowledge like maybe something here should change, whether it's how they show up or the actual strategy that they're taking in an attempt to get what they want?
Yeah. So I think, again, there's so many levels to this. All this stuff is so nuanced. And that's why I think it's really important. This is the big theme of stuff that like I've been starting to talk more about on my page, and a theme of a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be like sharing in 2023 is like, there's so much on social media right now, like information overload, and try this strategy and sign up for this masterclass. I offer them too, but I think sometimes we get so caught up in like, this person had success this way, so I need to try it this way, and this is what will work. And so I think there's a piece of that where it's like, we think like, even what I'm about to share, like that it might work. There's not like one clear answer to this, but I would say like a few things that come to mind are like, it could be like your nervous system, it could be your ego, like the need for control, shadow self, like all these different things that come into play about like, again, I'm a very big why person. Like, well, why can't I look at the failure? Like, what happens if I do? Okay, I'm going to look at what didn't go right so that I can change it. Like you were saying, like, I don't want to look at it because then I'm going to have to take responsibility. Instead of trying to force yourself into doing that because that overwhelms your nervous system, how can you ask just a few questions about like, well, what am I afraid is going to happen? And if you can like pull that out and navigate that, then you can see, okay, what's underneath that's what I can work on. And again, instead of just trying to muscle your way through doing that, which your nervous system is so important when it comes to this, which a lot of times, if people are so afraid of failure, a lot of times it can be because our nervous system, it's not even just our mind, like our everything lives in our body, and our body is literally saying no. And so when we have good or bad things happen, like our nervous system and our mind like files it away as like a good experience, bad experience, whatever. When it's a bad experience, it kind of like splinters out that way. It's like all in our body. That's why somebody can get a massage and like start crying and you're like, what the hell is that? And so when we think about like we had a bad experience and failure happened, our nervous system has filed that away as like a bad thing. And so what we need to slowly do is retrain ourselves, that failure isn't that scary, or I can look back at this and it's not going to be something that's going to overwhelm me. Because once you do that, and there's lots of different ways you can do that, but like even like, let's say, for example, you worked really hard on it. This is like something that's kind of superficial, but like you worked really hard on, no, I know something better. You worked really hard on like a master class or something, and you launched it and like no one signed up, and like that feels awful, right? Because it's we put out art essentially, and so like we're putting out art and nobody cares. Well, at least that's what we tell ourselves. And so we can look at that as a failure, and our mind and our body like remembers what that feels like, remembers how it feels like to show up on social media, and that sucks, and like talk about it and love it, and then like people aren't joining. And so the next time we do that, we can kind of think about, well, maybe it's like sharing something on social media, like the bits and pieces and levels to that, maybe not like the next launch, but like what are some small things that I can do that I can try again and show my nervous system, whether it works or it doesn't, that like I'm okay. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, let's say you post something on social media, and you've been avoiding it, but you do it. And like you practice some breath work, or you do a grounding technique, or you just close your phone and you don't sit there and reload a million seconds, and you teach your nervous system, like, this is safe. This isn't scary. This isn't a failure. Or even if it doesn't work out, like, I'm going to be okay. We have to like retrain our nervous system to know that these things that we're trying to do are okay, versus when we just throw ourselves into the ringer, that's when our nervous system goes, see, I told you this is overwhelming, not going to do that. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. We need to feel safe in order to be willing to take that next step towards what we want. And when we have evidence that we haven't felt safe in doing that before, it's like rebuilding that safety net for yourself and that trust within yourself of like, oh, I will be okay. I think for me personally, and a lot of the work that I do with my clients is thinking about like, you're so afraid of this, but what is worst case scenario? And sometimes we realize the worst case scenario that we're creating, number one, isn't actually all that bad. Like we're always going to be okay, but our minds are so powerful and will create insane scenarios about what's going to happen from the smallest thing. So it's giving yourself evidence of it's safe for me to take just one step towards that, feeling comfortable in that, and then being willing to take the next step and feel safe again.
Yeah, I think the other thing about that too, because this is another theme that like is really common within my clients, is all or nothing thinking. I think all or nothing thinking and perfectionism kind of like are,
yeah,
the same thing essentially in different ways, but it's the all or nothing thinking that gets in the way for a lot of people. This is a blind spot, because some people might be like, they might see this like hustle or masculine energy of just like, oh, a lot of people talk about, you just got to work hard. And so they'll just keep trying. Like you said, they'll do the same thing over and over again. And they'll think, oh, I'm just not working hard enough, or I wasn't consistent enough. Sometimes that's the case, but sometimes it doesn't have to be like this, I'm going to just jump in and push myself. In entrepreneurship, yes, you got to be willing to jump off the cliff and build a net on the way down. But sometimes that push might not be what you need. That's why I said this stuff's really nuanced. So like for you to think that it's like, okay, I either got to like push myself really hard or I need to give up. It doesn't have to be the case. How can you find out how you, for your life and your experiences, figure out how you show up on social media. Consistency for one person might be literally once a week, and that might be all they have the capacity for. And another person might be able to do 5 times a week. So I think whether it's social media, whether it's your habits, your schedule, whatever, it's figuring out what works for you, taking things that you're learning from mentors and courses and social media and implementing them for a little bit, seeing if they work, and if they don't, try something different instead of the all or nothing thinking of like, I got to try everything all at once, and then none of it works, because all or nothing never works.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking about that on Instagram stories today. We have to be willing to find the middle ground and compromise with ourselves. It's that rigid way of thinking, of believing I need to do everything perfectly or it's not worth doing anything at all, is exactly what holds people back from getting moving forward at all, let alone getting the results that they want, because it's literally standing in your way over and over and over. Because as soon as you feel like you don't have, like you said, the capacity to do everything, it's like, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to do nothing now. And then it turns into a spiral of self-sabotage for days or weeks or months until we hate ourselves again and feel like, oh, let me do everything again because I hate myself so much. And you just live, it's like, I called it in my own life, and I often refer to it in my work, of like the never ending hamster wheel of starting and stopping and never finding sustainability. Because there's always, for me, when I think about all or nothing thinking, people are waiting until they're so miserable in their lives to take action that it's like, I can't wait to just hurry up and get there. So let me try and do everything as fast as I can, believing that happiness is awaiting them when they get to the finish line of what they think they want. When it's like, no, like that's all just so wrong. Like happiness is not going to come from the thing, and what you're doing is not sustainable. Can you just take a step back? And like you said, ask yourself, what is going to work for me right now? And this leads me into, I think, another really important conversation that you had kind of hinted at a little bit is, number one, the information overload, right? Of feeling like I need more information before I can take a step. I have this like quote that I say all the time: information without implementation means nothing, because you're not going to create change just from learning alone. Sure, it can help you maybe feel better, know how to do better, but until you take those steps forward, you're not going to get anywhere. But also the problem on social media of watching other people and wanting to take their strategies and fit it into your life, when it's not always going to work. Just because it works for someone doesn't mean it's going to work for you, especially based off of your own life and where you are right now. How do you think people can determine for themselves, do I need more information? If that answer is yes, how do I decide who I want to get that information from? Or do I just need to give myself some time to take what I already know, implement in my life, and then see where that leads me? And then maybe I need more information. How do you think people can decide that for themselves, where they're at?
Yeah, it's so funny that you're talking about this, because I have a new group. I'm switching it to start in January instead of December, but it's called like I Work Less and Make More. And it's literally about this, because I think that people are either in information overload, or if they realize that they have the awareness that they're saying this, like exactly what you're saying, like, well, then what do I do? And I think that the way I'm like, because I'm all about, I love metaphors. So like visual, especially with my ADHD brain, like it helps me just like make sense of things. So I think about it in the sense of like, when people tell me, oh my God, like I'm such a personal development junkie. Like I listen to this many podcasts in a week and I read this many books. And it's like, that's great. But if we took 2 of you in a parallel universe and one of them listened to 15 podcasts in a week and then the end of the week, we chatted with them. And then we had one person that listened to 1 podcast, but implemented the entire time. Who do you think is going to have more success or be further ahead? The other one's just going to have a bunch of stuff in their brain, which can still beneficial, but then it's just overload. Then you don't know what to do. So I think one of the things that I think is important to do is kind of like sit back and like, one, take a information like detox, like whether that means like not, maybe even if you have to go as extreme as like not being on social media, it depends on how like overwhelmed you are and everything, but like maybe you're not even on social media for like even just like 2 or 3 days, or even a day, or if you're going to be on social media, like don't bookmark anything, don't save anything, don't like, if you're going to just be on there for whatever purpose, but not to like absorb, and then like take an inventory of what you've either recently or currently been learning. Like what has been the podcasts that you're listening to? What are the books that you're listening to? And like look back, like, are you the person that takes notes? Do you not take notes? If you don't, then that's a whole separate conversation, because how are you going to implement any of the information that you learned? If you do take notes, can you go back and look at those notes and then say like, I'm a big note taker. So like if I take notes on something, like when I listen to a podcast or whatever, I take those notes and then I literally try to practice and implement what I learned like that day, that week with my clients, with myself. So even if you could do kind of like a big brain dump and like look back, maybe not the whole year. Yeah, I guess you could do that, but like look back recently of your notes or however you consume your information, your bookmarks on Instagram that you never use, that we always are, I'm going to use this later, never do. And then look at that and then see if you can kind of like filter out any of the BS, any of the stuff that like really doesn't matter. And then maybe you have like a master list of like all the things that you have learned are important to you. And then take one thing and for 1 week, not one day, 1 week, just implement all of that and then kind of focus on that and then see how that works. Because I can promise you, even without knowing who's listening to this, every single person that's listening to this, now it might be a bold claim, but has enough tools to last them for the next 6 months without consuming any more information by just implementing. Yeah. You literally not consume anything else. And so I think if you look at, once you have an inventory, you can kind of figure out like, where are the holes? Like, oh, I have a lot of information on this, but I really don't have a lot of information on this. Like I need a strategy for this, with like how to scale or something like that. But I know a lot about mindset. So let me do that work. Let me do some shadow work, whatever. So then you can kind of see where the holes are, what you can put your focus on and just be you in the relationship with you and grow that. And then maybe see where the holes are. Now, once you see where the holes are, then you have both of those like pieces of information. You can say, what do I think is going to move? Like really take an honest, like, look, what's going to help me move forward? Because I can promise you, you're most likely going to understand that you just need to implement. And then you might be like, you know what? I've actually done a good job of implementing this. I really do think that this is what I need. And then you can kind of decide from there, like what path you need to take. But I think that inventory would be really necessary in order to make that decision.
Yeah, I love that. Do you think that people struggle with having an honest conversation with themselves and admitting that they struggle with implementing and they think it's like, I'm just missing a key piece of information that is going to like bust my brain open and all the success is going to come raining down on me? Because I think I agree with every single word that you said, but I think that so many people are unwilling to be honest with themselves about the fact that they can't fucking stay consistent. And they think I implemented for a day, my whole life is supposed to change. And they don't realize like even a week, staying consistent with it for a week is amazing. But still very little is actually going to change in terms of the big audacious goals that people have for themselves. It's like, we have to be willing to be honest with ourselves and say, am I actually doing what I know how to do? Or am I just like continuing to stand in my way? Which is why the work that you and I do, especially with the mindset, is so important, because we have so much evidence that knowing what to do and how to do it, it's just not enough, because you will 10 out of 10 times, if you're a person who does it, you will continue to stand in your way and not take action.
Yeah, there's so many things I have to say about that, because like I feel so strongly about that. Most of the time, because we have egos, we're not honest with ourselves about anything. Like in our relationships, like we're always like, well, the other person is like more of the problem, but like sometimes it's us. You know what I mean? So I think that honesty piece is so key, and not to be self-serving, but this is what we do, but it's just the God honest truth because of my own experience. This is why, I mean, you and I, we run masterclasses, masterminds, groups, like we do all the other things. But if you're in a place where you're unsure, there's no other way to figure that out. Like you obviously can kind of have a conversation with yourself, but in terms of signing up for something else, one-on-one is going to be the answer for that, because one-on-one is the only thing that's going to be able to give you the answers to what your blind spots are. I can't tell you how many times, even being super successful, where I'm like, I've always had mentors where I'm like, okay, I'm going to get on this call with my mentor and I know exactly what I need to do. Like, I'm just going to tell her and she can kind of give me a pep talk. And then I talk about it. And then they like ask me a few questions and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that was it. You know what I mean? So it's like getting clear on those blind spots and figuring out like, is it that I need to implement more? Or is it that I actually do need this strategy? Really, I don't think, maybe there's another way, but I don't think you can get that real type of clarity unless you do one-on-one. Now, not everybody can afford to do an investment like a one-on-one or is ready. A lot of times there's just that fear involved. So I understand that. So I would think what I would say to that is like, if you're in a place where you can't afford one-on-one, you are unsure if it's like, there's that one secret sauce that it is, which I can promise you it's probably not, but like this
probably, it's definitely not. It's not.
Exactly.
It's not.
Yeah, definitely not. because it's never just one thing. Just like with like, like weight loss or like health, wellness journey, like we're like, oh, apple cider vinegar in the morning with lemon, that's what's going to do it. And it's like, that might help in some way, but it's that with like 50 other things that are going to help change you. Right. But so I would say if you're in that position and you're not ready to work with a coach and you're just trying to kind of figure it out, I would say the answer is to just lean towards implementation and just say like, I'm going to promise myself, maybe I'm, not going to sign up for something for like a month or whatever, but I'm going to get really consistent, not perfect, consistent with this one thing. Maybe the thing, because even if you're unsure, you probably know like the main things that you struggle with or that you have problems with. And it's like, okay, let me just commit to the next month or two or whatever of just head down, blinders on, let me go implement this and then see what happens. If you put even more consistency than you've been doing at the end of those month or two, if you've been really consistent, you feel like you're flowing and you feel like you still are stuck, then maybe you can say like, okay, now I need to do something else. But if you're like, oh, wait, that was the answer to my problems, not that you still can't be involved in things and sign up for things. You definitely can. There's just a balance of like figuring out like what's kind of necessary. And I think leaning towards implementation is what's more important.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think people who are, and maybe I'm wrong in making this assumption, but I think sometimes people who are addicted to personal development and even things like master classes and even courses with coaches, they don't really understand the difference between like being taught something versus actually being coached. And they're two very different things. Like a master class and even a course is great to sign up to learn things, but unless there's that level of personalization and accountability and like real support of where you are and what you're going through, none of it is really personalized to you. And there's no way for us to understand when we're teaching to 50, 60, 80, 100 people, there's no way for me to help you when I don't know anything about you, right? So it's like, if you know that you know everything that you need to be doing, but you're struggling with that, like you said, I think the best way there, if you're not a person who can be brutally honest with themselves, and most people in this position aren't, they don't have a relationship really with themselves at all, it's valuable to have a conversation with someone. And even if it's not a coach, even if it's a therapist, I don't know, maybe they can help you in uncovering how you can improve being honest with yourself. Because I think that's a skill we should all be building, to be able to have real, honest conversations with ourselves. I think about my relationship with myself a lot as like being in a relationship with someone outside of me. And like, if I'm constantly lying to myself and like hiding from myself, what am I doing to that relationship? I'm losing trust. I'm losing respect. I'm losing love. And without those things, I can get all the things that I want. I'm still not going to be happy because the relationship I have with myself is shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like even masterminds can be great for that as well. Like it depends on the mastermind, obviously, but like you're still going to get a little bit more of an intimate touch than like the masterclass. But I do think like that word accountability, again, is a very big theme for me, or it has been, but is going to be in 2023. And you'll understand this. When we do fitness, like you run a fitness group and it's like 30-day boot camp. And it's like, you check in, did you do your workout? Did you drink water? Did you, eat healthy, whatever. And I feel like, not that it doesn't exist, but I feel like I don't see as much of that on social media, even within like, cause you have masterminds and one-on-ones, like accountability is one of the biggest pieces of that. But I think that is like kind of a missing piece with it. And so like one way I know I'm going to be shifting in 2023 is not just like the information masterclass and teaching things, which are great. Cause like what you're saying, like, I think is so important to point out is like, what we're saying might even sound weird because we run these things. So it's like, are you telling me not to sign up for these things? I'm like, yeah, because I'd rather you see success than me make money, but it depends on where you're at. There are going to be some people that can be honest with themselves and can have those conversations. And a masterclass is going to be great because it's going to give you information. You do implement, you do take action, sign up for those. Those are going to be awesome. But if you're in a position where, like you said, you can't be honest with yourself, and you have just been absorbing information, then doing something that's going to help keep you accountable or give you clarity, I think will be so important. But I think for each person, try to figure out what they want. Especially if you're somebody who like has problems implementing, being honest with yourself and taking action, accountability, however you're going to find that, is going to be what helps you the most. Just as you would be in a fitness boot camp, checking in if you did your workout, having a place where you can check in, like, did you just implement what you've been learning? Because that's going to be what's going to like give you everything from there. Action breeds confidence, not the other.
100%. 100%. I love it. I feel like we feel so similarly on so many things. People are waiting for the confidence and the belief in themselves and feeling like they're going to nail it to do something for the very first time. I'm like, you can't expect to have confidence in doing something that you've literally never done before. How in the world do you think you're going to be a master on day one? But it goes back to that fear of failure and not wanting to look stupid or be embarrassed or be judged or potentially have things not go the way that they wanted. So they never get to a place where they can feel so confident in themselves because they're not willing to be a beginner.
Yeah, and I always like to use this metaphor of like to just remind ourselves like how silly it is to like think that way of like riding a bike. Like you never knew how to ride a bike and you got on a bike and you rode it once and it wobbled and you were like, that's scary. I'm not doing that. I don't want people to see me wobble around. And then the next week you come back and you try to ride the bike. You're like, why can't I ride this bike? What the hell? It's like, why would you expect to be good at the bike if you're not riding the bike? It's like being comfortable. And I go back to what I said in the beginning about like, whose voice is that? Like, whose voice is telling you that failure is scary, that you don't want to look stupid? Because it's not your own. Kids don't just wake up one day and all of a sudden like are afraid of failure. It could be society, might not be your parents. But like if you can get clear on that and know like whose voice, what experience is making it so that these things like failure and chasing after your dreams is like the scariest thing in the world, then it will be easier to have the mindset that it sounds like, you know, you and I have, and it'll be easier versus because I know people listen and they're like, yeah, that's so easy for you. But it's like, it's not just like, oh, we just believe it. Like there's a lot of levels to get there.
100%. And I think that's one of the reasons that I feel so, so I don't like to use the word obligated, but I do feel obligated to share the reality of what it takes to become a person like you and I, who has this tenacity and willingness to do things before we feel ready and face failures. I'm willing to share like when I have failures and when I'm sabotaging myself and when I'm standing in my own way, because people often make the assumption of like, great for her because it's easy for her or because she's always been that way. And I'm like, I'm so thankful that I shared on social media for as long as I did before I started my business, because you can scroll back to watch me fail for the last 7 years before I started my business, right? Like, I'm so happy that that's there because it's evidence of like, I have not always been this way and I've had to work and still work. It's the work is never done, because even when, and I think people feel defeated by that, like you move forward, but then it's like, oh, things aren't going the way I wanted. And here I am sabotaging. Or I saw you had a post the other day of like feeling so much imposter syndrome. Like things come up even after you've done the work. It's like you still have to keep putting the effort in. And I think for a lot of people, that's a scary thought of like, oh, I have to work at this forever. I don't want to work at this forever.
Yeah, it's so important. I think I forget what I was talking about this recently, but what you're saying about like things can come up even if you've worked on them. The way I look at it, there's going to be certain wounds, trauma, experiences that like once we work through them, we're kind of like, oh, this is old news. Like it doesn't really come up as much. But then there's going to be other things that at each level of money, of business success will continue to come up. It'll just look different. And so like imposter syndrome, for example, like people who are, you know, not even don't have a business yet will struggle with imposter syndrome of like, who am I, you know, to run a business? Like who's going to buy from me? And then you work on yourself, you see success, and then you get to the next level and you think you're not going to struggle with imposter syndrome, but then you join a mastermind when everybody's making 10 times the money as you. And you're like, oh my God, who am I to be here? But then you get to the next level, like when you're making a lot of money, and then again, you like, there's so many levels. And I think that like leaning into the feeling of it's okay to like, it's not even like it's okay. Like you want to, and it can take time to get there, but like I get excited for like a new challenge. Like if and this was, I think what kind of, I asked the universe for change and it gave me change, you know, how unexpected, but like I felt like, especially last year and like honestly up until like June of this year, like I was like looking around and I was like, this is like too easy. Like I feel really comfortable. And I was like, I don't feel uncomfortable. And then as soon as like I said that and I was like, I need to feel uncomfortable, like the universe was like, here, bitch. Like, and then it just hit the fan. But of course, it's not like I'm like, this is awesome. Like I went through my moments of like crying and wanting to burn my business to the ground. But then once I kind of get out of that space and I'm not in that space as long. I think that's the key. Like it's not that we don't struggle with these things. It's just we don't stay there as long. And so like once I do, I try to get myself like excited. In one of my favorite books, I can't remember the author. I talk about this. I think I talked about this like two other podcasts I was on recently. The book Chatter. It's a newer book. I forget the author. I think it only came out because he talks about the pandemic. So I think it came out within like the past 2 or 3 years. But in it, he talks about, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember the way he put it. I can't remember. What was I just saying? Because I'm trying to remember exactly how I
You
put
were
it.
talking about life throwing you like a curveball halfway through the year, and you were feeling like you were
Oh,
wanting to feel
exactly.
excited for
Yeah, about being excited about it. And so he talks about how, like, and this is my ADHD brain, I lose my train of thought all the time. But so like the excitement of like telling your, and it seems weird, but it works. He talks a lot about this thing called distancing language in the book. But one of the things of distancing language is like when you start to get like heart racing or like sweating, like panic attack, anxiety, those feelings, maybe not to the point of panic attack, but like any of those like sweaty palms, like you're getting nervous or stressed out, it's telling yourself like out loud or in your brain, like that my heart racing is excitement. It's not.
there are a lot of people that talk about that. I learned about that many years ago. Such a powerful, simple shift because excitement does feel exactly the same. It's like, can you tell yourself you're excited about this and not petrified?
Yeah, it's like butterflies in your stomach. And so it's like such a simple thing, but it really, really works. And so I think that's like a tool you can use when you're like leaning into this, like into failure or whatever. Like you don't have to be like toxic positivity where you're like, I'm failing and this is fun. Like allow yourself to be upset, mad, whatever, but then figure out a way to like look at it. Another thing he talks about is like looking at the issue as like a challenge, kind of like a video game. Like, okay, how can I beat the next boss, the next level, essentially? And I think that when you can get into that space, that's what successful people do, is they don't look at it. And when I write a book, it's going to be very tough love about like pity parties. And it's like to get real tough love for a second, there's just so much whining. It's like, oh, but this is hard. And I don't feel like it being hard. I want it to be easy. Like no one successful is doing that. No one successful is doing that. So it's like, you gotta like understand, like I'm tough love, but I'm also like, give yourself grace, understand yourself from a certain level, like listen to your nervous system. Don't push yourself from this place of masculine energy. But it doesn't have to be so in the feminine that you're like, I'm just gonna be and I'm just gonna exist. And like you gotta like find that balance for you that is like, I'm going to give myself grace, but also not gonna bitch, whine, and complain about everything that's hard because life is hard and it's going to be hard and it's different for everybody at different spaces. But how can I figure out how to find that balance? You know what I mean? Of that like grace and pushing myself.
Yeah, all of my listeners are probably like reciting my famous line in their head. I have this famous line where I say, there's a fine line between giving yourself grace and calling yourself out on your own bullshit excuses. And only you know which side of that line you're on. And it comes back to the honesty that the honest communication that you're having with yourself. We all have excuses. It's, are you going to give in to them? Are you going to choose to listen to those? And when you need to give yourself grace, great, do it. But at the same time, giving yourself grace 24/7, 365 is going to keep you exactly where you are in your life right now.
Exactly.
Can we selfishly, because I know we're like coming up on an hour here, selfishly, I really want to talk about, and my audience might not even care, but I'm so curious. How has your shift from your Instagram account that you had at like 30 something thousand followers, I think maybe even more than that, what has it been like creating a new Instagram account? Can you talk about why because I know there are a lot of coaches here who are feeling like engagement is dead. They've had their pages forever. People aren't interested in what they're posting anymore. It's frustrating. We're all pissed off at the algorithm. Can you talk about what that transition has been like for you? Like what the intention was behind doing that? And how do you feel now having a new account? Because I feel like it would feel so freeing, but also terrifying at the same time.
Oh, I will say it is the most humbling thing I've done this year. And it's a part of like the shit that hit the fan this year for sure. Because I think I started at the very beginning of August. But it's funny too, because I was literally like at like I was about to hit 50,000. I think it was at like 49.7 or something. And then I restarted my Instagram. Not that like it matters anyway, but I remember I just wanted to hit the 50,000 mark. But It's a very humbling experience because the numbers don't matter at the end of the day. Cause I know people that have less than 10,000. Like I follow this girl right now. She has like 6,000 followers and she makes multi-million dollars. So like the numbers don't matter, but there is a piece of it where you are reaching more people. And if you reach more people, like the ratio is just like higher, right? But I've gotten better at reaching my people now, which before, yeah, I maybe reached more people, but I'm reaching more of my people. It's starting to finally go up. I think within the past few weeks, I've finally started to see like a consistent like trajectory in the right direction. I was like barely getting over like 100 views on my story, which on my old Instagram, I would get like 1,200 to 2,000 views. So to go from that and where I typically sell on my story to 100, like even though I'm getting better at connecting with my people, like outside of limiting beliefs or anything like that, like 100 versus almost 2,000, that's a big difference. You know what I mean? And I noticed a difference of like, I wasn't getting as many DMs and like the daily like I would get 30 to 40 DMs in a day. I wasn't getting that. And now it's starting to go up. But I would say like the intention behind it was even a year ago from mentors or coaches. I worked with like an Instagram coach before. Everybody always told me based off of like my content, like they were like, your content is good, you should be getting more engagement. Like because they would ask me all like the checklist questions, are you doing this? And I'm like, yes, 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 or no, no, no. And then they were like, well, if you're doing all the right things and you're still not getting engagement, then you probably need to start a new Instagram. And they said it was because when you have an account for an extended period of time and you've posted about a lot of different topics, and I've literally posted about everything under the sun. Like told you I was a vegan recipe page. So I posted about everything. And it was my personal account before. So the algorithm like starts to get confused about who to send your content out to. And it gets to a point where there's no coming back. So when they told me that, it was kind of like, you can keep staying at like where you're at or start over, gonna struggle for a little bit, but then I always remind myself of this when I try anything hard or something comes up that's scary. Am I going to worry about this as much as I am a year from now? Probably not. So I kind of like had that conversation with myself. So it was that reason. It was also that if you go to like your settings on Instagram and you like type like account status or whatever, you can see if you have any like flagged things on your account. Because I also used it as my personal account in terms of like following friends and stuff like that, I would like comment on my friends and be like, oh my God, bitch, you look so good. And like they would flag me for bullying. I literally got like three things. Bullying because I was commenting on a friend. Like I think I love like electronic music. I commented on a DJ's post one time when he put out like a new song, and I love like bass music. And I was like, oh my God, this song makes me want to punch babies. Flagged. And like I understand, but it's like I asked for it to be reviewed and then it got stuck in review, and then they said they wouldn't approve it. And so due to like my account being around for so long, posting about a bunch of different things, and because my account was flagged for bullying, like they were like, community guy. I'm like, I'm not bullying anybody. Like I understand why, but it was like that if they actually looked at it, they would realize that wasn't the case. And so because of that, and it was an issue that said under review for almost a year. I was like, I'm starting over. So I started over. And I think it definitely felt like fresh. I felt like a lot of the tools that I wasn't using before, like some of the tips I got were like, don't follow any accounts that aren't similar to yours on the new page. So like I was following like food accounts and DJs that I liked and friends on my old page. So now on this page, I'm not doing that. So I feel like I'm like really starting fresh with like everything. I understand things more. And I started in August. It's December now. And I feel like I'm finally getting like 400 or 500 views on my story. I'm finally like hitting over 3,000 views on my reels, which before I was getting like 30, 40, 50,000. So I'm not even close to where I was before, but I know that like in a year, I'll be hitting probably past those numbers. So I think if you're thinking about doing it and any of the things I shared, you're like, oh, that's me. I would say, because I wish I would have ripped the Band-Aid off sooner. And like, I did it and like then launched one of the biggest things I ever did. Of course, after I did my new page, I'm like, I should have just launched it on my old page. So if you're thinking about it even a little bit, I would say just rip the Band-Aid off. It's going to be humbling, but you're going to be fine after a while. It's just going to be a process to like, so
it's that understanding that like if you want to do it, the time is going to pass regardless. There will be a period of discomfort and like probably feel, and that's with anything that you do in your life. In the beginning, it always feels uncomfortable, but it's like if you want it, the time is going to pass regardless, and what could have happened in that time. I think once we start to see success in anything, the only regret that people have is, man, I wish I would have done this sooner. Like, man, I wish I would have started sooner.
100%. Yeah. And like, if it, like it, because if I even thought about like, oh, well, I want to wait a little bit, like, let me wait till 2023, I probably would be in the same position on my Instagram, kind of like getting like, not so great views. But it wasn't even really like, yes, like the algorithm can be like a pain in the butt and the views can be like annoying, but like, as long as you're getting good at like talking to your people, like the numbers don't matter necessarily if you're getting good at that. So I feel like, because I learned a lot this year and I've been improving, like we're always improving and talking to our right person, right? And like with the changes of social media, I think I've gotten better with that. But like I do think it's just better to like rip off the band-aid, because who knows, in like 2 years there's probably going to be like, I mean, I don't know if you have Be Real, but Be Real like is very different from anything we have now. I don't know. Marketers always find a way to end up selling on an app, so they'll probably figure out a way to do that. But there, who knows, there could be like a different huge social media app in like a few years. So like I feel like it's kind of just like I'm in it for the long haul. Like, so might as well just rip it off.
Yeah, 100%. I think about that a lot too. It's like, that's why other platforms like my podcast is so important to me, because we never really know what's going to happen with social media. We never really know, like, will this platform be around forever? And we need to make sure we're keeping up. And it's sometimes challenging because you're like, well, I'm already trying to master all of these other things that I'm doing in my business, and now I have to keep up with these new platforms just to like stay relevant. I think people think that being a coach or an entrepreneur or an influencer, when you use social media, is like, oh, you just post on social media. Like, actually, it's so much fucking work.
Oh, it's so, and it's like, and it's exhausting, but like, if you're like, you have to choose your hard. There's going to be a hard. So like, yeah, it could be exhausting to try to keep up with this, but would I rather have a regular job working for somebody else? That's hard too. I'd rather choose this as my hard any day. You know what I mean? I think too, if like you're stressing out about, like, it'd be better for you to focus on maybe 1 to 2, maybe 3 different platforms and get good at those, versus like trying to have everything, because like that's not going to benefit anybody anyway, right? So like, don't stress yourself out too much about trying to become an expert at all the different apps. I think at the end of the day, like, even though nobody wants to hear it, and I never want to hear it, even though I know how important it is email is always the most important, because Instagram would explode. So like, if there's anything that you're doing, just make sure you're building an email list, because if you lost your Instagram, like a lot of people did like a month ago or whatever, like you're screwed. So that
I
email
lost mine for 24 hours and I was like, what in the whole entire fuck is happening?
Oh gosh, I'm especially after restarting my Instagram. That's like my biggest fear. Like, and the thing is like, even if it happens, I'll be fine. I'll figure it out.
Well, that's the attitude of a winner. The attitude of someone who will be successful is, no matter what, I will be fine. And like, really understanding that, because then you'll have the ability to try again, because you know that no matter what the outcome, like, you're going to be good.
Yeah. And I always say, what's the alternative? Like, I give up and cry in my room. Like, no, like the world could end tomorrow. Like, I'm just going to keep showing up, even though it's hard. It doesn't mean that it's easy. I cry often, but I still keep going. You know what I mean?
Same. I loved that. I feel like we didn't even get to half the things I wanted to talk about, because we were just talking about things that are so important, and I know so valuable for my audience. I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast. Can we end with one final question? If there was one piece of advice that you could give to someone who, in any area of their life, they're like, I just want to achieve my goal, what is one piece of advice that you would give them to encourage them to start or keep going? What would you say?
I always want, like, the always thing that comes to mind when I like hear this is just like the consistency word, which people hate hearing because it's like what everybody says, but there's a reason why everybody says it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just like we're saying it for fun. But I think like consistency and patience are so key, especially patience. And they go hand in hand, because we live in a world where we have a phone in our hand that gives us whatever we want when we want. We are chemically addicted to it. We get dopamine when we get a text message or we see a new video, we're scrolling on TikTok, and it makes us very impatient. We also see the 1% of somebody's success, which makes us want it right now. You know what I mean? And so I think that if you have goals, like the consistency over perfection and the patience and like falling in love with the gritty process of it and knowing it's not going to be cute and it's going to be unsexy will always make you way more successful. And like to add on to that would be like really lean into never wanting to be the smartest person in the room. I did that for a really long time where I was like, I like heard of self-help books and I was like, I don't need to be told what to do. I just need to do it. And
We're
I like
the same person. I did the same exact thing. I was like, my mind is good. Like, I got this. I'm fine. Like, that's how you stay dumb.
Yeah, right. So it's like being a loner and then getting even deeper. Why do you need to be a loner? Because there's something that's making you feel that way. But like if you let go of that and like I'd rather be like in a room full of people where everybody's like making way more than me than be in a room where like what am I, the coolest person because I'm making the most money? That's literally not going to get me anywhere. So I think like consistency, patience, and like being willing to fall in love with the gritty process and the like I don't want to be the smartest person in the room will always get you really far.
I love that, especially all of it, but especially the falling in love with the journey part, because I think people overlook that far too often. And I believe the only way that we're really willing to be consistent long-term is by actually enjoying what we're doing.
Yeah.
100%. I loved this. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I know that my audience is going to find so much value in this conversation. Tell people where they can connect with you. And if you have anything coming up that you think would be important for them to be a part of, why don't you share that with them?
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm like very much like just on Instagram for the most part. Just at the Tough Love Coach. And so I do one-on-ones. I have a mastermind coming up I'm gonna launch it in January. I haven't even talked about it yet. So if you're listening to the podcast, so you get sneak peek. But like it's gonna be launching in February and it's gonna kind of be what we talked about, like this idea of accountability. So instead of just like info, it's gonna be literally just like business accountability mastermind. So that's coming up in February. And then like I said earlier, I have this it's a 2-week, like kind of, I don't really want to call it a masterclass because it's less about info and more about implementation, about like the idea of working less and making more. So for workaholics, perfectionists, figuring out how to believe that you can actually do that and then implement it. Because I think that being told you can work less and make more is one thing, but actually trying it out and seeing for yourself that you don't have to work 16-hour days like I used to, I think is important. So that I was going to hold it in December, but I think I'm going to move it to January. So essentially one-on-one that I work less and make more master or accountability group. And then my mastermind coming up in February, but you can always DM me about anything I have, or ask me any questions because I love chatting. So
amazing. I will put Alexis's Instagram in the show notes of this episode. Definitely go connect with her, especially if you like the things that I talk about. You will love her. She is a tough love approach, much like I am, in terms of just if you want it, no one's coming to save you. Go do the work. You are capable of changing your life. It does not matter how many times you failed, how many times you've quit on yourself. You are capable of becoming who you want to be and achieving what you want in your life. Okay. All right, you guys, I love you so much. And I will talk to you on the next episode of the Queen of Pep Talks podcast. See ya.